Toby N, thank you. Jimmy C, thank you. Recurring and frequent, says Mr. Producer. So much appreciated. I already know that. And I really appreciate it, Jimmy. Lindsay N sends a donation with, thank you, Mr. Ingbretson and Mr. Producer, for sharing this rich content. Your insightful videos have been a key source of my education in oil painting. Warmly, Lindsay N. You know, one of the things I'm doing here is to, admittedly, to try to provide content to people who may never be able to afford it. I might have been that person. And so everything you all do to donate to the cause here, to keep Mr. Producer positive, shall we say. And by the way, Mr. Producer, came up with this idea of doing this. I made some efforts on my own to market, that is to say, to establish in the marketplace the values and methods related to the Boston School and the way I think, the way I operate, which is basically largely out of that. And but Mr. Producer came up with this idea of a podcast, and it just fits completely in with my motive to try to make my information or my educational opportunity the most affordable in the planet, in this world of representational painting. So you guys who are part of it, thank you very much for participating in all the different ways you do, by the way, but thank you for the dollars. And for especially when you guys keep bringing them on some continuing basis as you can afford to. So just massively appreciated, that's all. I should be sending you a picture of Mr. Producer's youngin'. What is he now, 3 months old, Mr. Producer? Cutest little Dickens. I might be a little prejudiced too, but all right. We are picking up on Leonardo, except this isn't about, this is a whole different discussion, not based on that. It comes out of a conversation we had at the studio the other day. I find that people don't actually read Leonardo, don't read him well, and don't read him at all. But I wanted to talk about something that applies to everything we do when and mostly initially at least, about setting up casts and for the purposes, for in various ways, and what that needs to be accomplishing, when you do set up a cast or a still life or a portrait or even when you go outdoors. Leonardo says the first object of a painter is to be able to make a simple, flat surface appear like a relievo. You know what he's saying there, right? And some of its parts detached from the ground. He's saying it needs the first skill we have. This is representational painting 101. This isn't abstract painting. It isn't pure decorative painting. The first object of a painter is to make a simple flat surface appear like a relievo. Now that means a two-dimensional surface appear three-dimensional, right? Now, so some people would say, well, you're fooling the eye. This is all just fooling the eye. In some sense, yeah, of course it is, because it is a flat surface, and things do look like there's actual space, sort of, or relief in the sense of bas relief, sculptural relief. But then the other part about, and some parts of it are detached from the ground. So some parts of it actually looking like they're out here or out here, right? All right, he who excels all others in that part of the art deserves the greatest praise. This perfection of the art depends on the correct distribution of lights and shades, called chiaroscuro. Correct distribution, where you put them. If the painter then avoids shadows, he may be said to avoid the glory of the art and to render his work despicable to real connoisseurs. Now, of course, we're still talking about his main point here, which is the ability to make a thing look three-dimensional on a flat surface. Degas used to refer to does use the reference. He says drawing is the interpretation of form. It's a flat surface, so the interpretation is that whatever you do to make it appear like it's more than on a flat surface. It goes with the representational world because we are trying to embody in our work life as we see it, right? The stuff, the data of everyday life. The impressionist isn't any different. It's just that what he's also now incorporating the idea of the play of light in a more encompassing way, and sometimes even at the expense of certain other aspects of the visual impression. So I'm sure you get that, and that's not new information. So yeah, so so he talks about ignorant admirers of fine colors who have no knowledge of relievo. That would be the great whatever claim against the impressionists that oh they have nice color, but they haven't got a clue how to draw. And that's a question, right? That's really one of those reasons you have to consider whether you're a full-blown painter or you're skilled in all areas. Nevertheless, he puts that out there as a first point. And I'm going to talk about this. I'm showing you this for the fun of it. I'm showing you this painting. I mean, this photograph. That right in the bottom, in the middle, is Gamel. This photograph appears to have come straight out of the museum school. It was some class shot or whatever. And I say that because the drawing on the right looks like exactly the drawings I've seen from the museum school in person. I've seen them myself, where the figure, I'm going to put my hair over there, where the figure has been fully rendered as an outline, and then the modeling starts from the head and goes right down the figure. That seems to have been a thing, and frankly is an effective thing if you're an academic painter. You'll see that in Jerome and others as well. So that gives you some indication that the Otto Grundmann and those guys did have an academic model going on in that studio. In any case, what I'm showing you this for, though, is something different. It's going to be, I may come back to it, probably will come back to it, but I'm going to talk about various things that this photograph reveals to you. So the first one is how do things look round and detached both? So you can see the modeling on a head. This head looks like it's 3D, right? And so that's what's happening. He talks about chiaroscuro. It's the light and shade that does that. It's the modeling. It's the shadow. It's the shadowing, as he calls it. So Gamel's head looks 3D. It makes it look. It doesn't look flat, right? It does not appear flat. Some guys' heads, because of the way they're cut, appear to be more flat than some other ones. But so that's the first one, and it's just in this photograph, just for amusement's sake. I may come back to it still, as I said, because it's a photograph that has all these things that Leonardo is talking about. And I'm giving you 2 or 3 more quotes from Leonardo, and then one from Gamel and one from Degas. The one from Degas is what is in the title of this, unless Mr. Producer changed it. So what you can see is detached. He uses the expression detached from its background. So you can see how this portion of this head is not detached from the background. It's attached to to the dark stuff behind it, this portion of his head. This portion of his head starts coming out, and there's the conversation we're going to run into. Just notice these things. So this guy's head appears to be attached to the wall. Visually, it's attached. It's not separating. It's not detaching in the sense of it's being featured. And I'm going to talk about any number of these points. This head tends to disappear. The highlights are all that make it detach from the background. This one, against a light background, dark silhouette all the way around, tends to sit well forward. This one's a little bit of a mixed thing, right, et cetera, et cetera. This is the kind of discussion we're going to have today. But how much of this is based on the idea of contrast with shape, producing what's called a silhouette, and then et cetera, et cetera. So read more of Leonardo. I've already given you some of the quotes that appertain to this, but these are the things I'm going to be talking about. The whole issue of 2D to 3D, that's the relief model. Then the modeling idea and how that makes things look round. The detaching idea, which is making something look like it's sitting out in front of something else, and ways of doing that, which leads to the question of the silhouette, Degas saying it's all silhouettes. Then the idea of why you do that, and it's the idea of featuring. And I don't think Leonardo uses precisely that term, but now we're going to talk about the distribution of things like that, the things that are featured and how they distribute it. The production of arabesque, what that's about, and patterning. These are the things I'm going to try to cover today based on an initial discussion about the idea of silhouette. It does come from the background of cast drawing. Why do we set up our cast the way we do, and so on. But what I'm doing really is starting off with this whole idea of Leonardo and the idea of setting up a cast properly, or a still life setup properly. What does that even mean, right? But so that fun things in the picture can be featured. I use the word read so that you can read them. Things that are just tending to disappear, the lost and found model, the found things are the ones you can see. And the more it's a silhouette, the more interesting the silhouette, the more contrasty the silhouette, the more your eye's going to go there. And it's going to tell you things, et cetera, et cetera. So you'll see where this is coming from in a second. I don't think I'm giving this a great lead in, but so here you are. And again, this is from the book that's online in studio.ingbretson.com. You can find this book and read it for yourself. It's very PDF. It's very readable somehow or other. The way it's been photographed or whatever it's very nice. All right, on the backgrounds of painted objects, the ground which surrounds the figures in any painting ought to be darker than the light part of those figures and lighter than the shadowed part. First thing we picked up when we're working with Gamel. So what he's saying here is he's silhouetting the dark. This guy's head is being silhouetted. Degas put something light up here. He's got a middle tone to light here, and he makes a silhouette of he silhouettes the head. Okay, so this is that model of featuring. He wants you to do that. Now this area is an area where things are lost, but I'm going to show you the model that we had with Gamel before I do anything else. This is one that Ben did. Ben C, you've run into him before, and is one of the people that's drawing on his own, but sending me information and wants information, conversation. But this is my conversation to him is, you need to make a silhouette on both sides, right? This is just following Leonardo. And that's what I'm saying is so much of what happens eventually throughout the history of painting is based on something. Leonardo is the most significant base for educating your eye to what's happening in nature and the kinds of stuff we think about in painting as well. So he's telling you how to create separation from the background and give a sense of relief. The sense of relief is caused by what he calls shadowing, the modeling. That's the rounding of it, so it looks like it's 3D. But the detachment from the background is produced by the silhouette. I'm doing this because, you need to know these things. You need to have thought them through. I know most of you will just automatically do it, but mastery is knowing the names of things and when and why you do them, okay? And then having the skill, of course, to do them, to make sure you do them and do them well. There's so much other stuff that goes on in here. For example, Gamel's conversation was, don't let the light side and the dark side be equal in total amount. Don't split those things right down the middle. This would be a typical example, the light dominating 3/4 of it and the dark being a modest, relatively a third or maybe whatever, the 25%. That's just one of those things. You want the light of the face to be featuring as a light against the rest of the painting. You want this to actually, if you're doing a portrait, that's a fairly standard thing. You want the portrait to be featured, right? So that's what he's doing here. He had a light cloth, and I think he probably found that he needed to darken that to get this, not to be weaker than this, right? So you're getting the picture, though. That's more detail than we wanted to get into. I think that, and so I think I'll go ahead and talk about the rest of, one of the other points that's made by Leonardo is that if you put a light thing with front light on it against a background that's dark, you will lose the sides, right? It won't stand out in relief. It'll tend to stay back. And of course, if you guys blur your eye when you're looking at these with me, you'll see more clearly what's going on here. Now you can see maybe the very middle of this might be sort of that value, but again, from the front light, the sides of this thing, if this were the same value as this, the sides would be darker because the main light is right down the middle, and so it's getting darker as it goes as a round thing. You'll find that discussion in Leonardo. So this is silhouetting all the way around, dark on all sides against the light. That's pretty much what I would say to you, that Ang is, if he's always lighting in fairly nearly front light, so that he's always getting a relative silhouette, a silhouette on both sides, relatively equal. This side's, the light's a little more leftward, and this side is darker, this side's a little bit lighter. That sort of thing is what you actually want. You want that kind of variety. But what the point is with Leonardo is, do you see how the light things are featured against the dark? The dark, even over here, the shadow side of the light things can be featured against the light. Now, in this case, I'm encouraging one to not make this light so strong that it dominates these lights. That probably was a conversation we had. This also is from a student setting up something in the classroom. But you can see how nicely, even though weak, this silhouettes against that. And those are the things that detach it from the background and bring it forward. Okay, so the little bit of lightness against this makes this in front of that, this in front of this, et cetera, et cetera. Doesn't mean it's simply a formula. It's not simply a formula, but when you make dark on light or light on dark, they detach, and one will go back and one will stay forward. Because other data will help it do that, right? This thing partially goes back a little bit because this is, you can see physically it's in front of it, and this is also in front of it, so this looks like it's in a second row back. On the other hand, this detaches from the background, so the background is way back. One of the things I'm saying to you all when you're doing these things is notice whether or not you're drawing, when you've articulated this contrast, does it suggest that same level of detachment? Does it suggest the same distance back? In this case, maybe it's a foot or two back. Does it suggest that to you? It should. If you get the contrast and the sharpness of edge right, you should. And by the way, Benson says, and make sure that you make two flat values side by side. That's how important it is. Don't have this one getting darker and darker right up to the edge, because you'll lose that separation. It won't be that. You won't have the sudden abruptness you need to create a real pop, a real separation. Now that can happen. You can be set up that way to be more, fogged or whatever at the edge. But if you want that kind of detachment, you won't do it. And when you're painting it, you'll make sure you get all the strength of this light and all the power of that dark right at the edge, so you can get all that pop. Some of these things I'm saying are going to be more advanced than others, but so let's go back. Let's go to the next quote. You got the message. The silhouetting, the setup, standard stuff in the Gamble studio when we got there. I don't think I'd ever heard anything about that at the Art Students League when I was working there. It really is because nobody in any of those settings had an opportunity much as teachers to configure the thing in a formal, and as formal as a way of educating as you would need. And they didn't have, you could just come and go into classes, so I could just be teaching you something and then you could wander off and forget about them. But once you got to Gamble, this stuff was all primary, just basic information, and you just saw it in all the masters that you were looking at, and you were looking at a lot once you got to Gamble. So, but it's very clear stuff. The party goes on, when you make a lighter thing against a dark, you create an event for the eye. And that's where these are like entertainment centers for the eye. This area right here is a major entertainment center. These are also very interesting. And the total package of all this stuff is fascinating in and of itself. The distribution of the major dark to secondary darks is a thing that has to do with values and spotting. It gets to be important what happens in the silhouette portions of those things. Again, in the context we're talking about now. I hope I don't wander too widely with this. One of the points Leonardo said, well, maybe he's about to make it, so I'll come back to this one, I think. How to detach and bring forward figures out of their background. If your figures be dark, place it on a light ground. If it be light, upon a dark ground. Well, there you are. This figure is indoors. The light on the figure is from the back. It's backlight. But this model, this is Gertrude Page, by the way, a top Boston School trained painter, Tarbell, those guys. And but she's used a dark, call it a dark. It's not a black inky dark, but it's a dark, and the lights are being used as silhouette. Okay, this is pure and simple. Degas saying it's all silhouettes. Well, what does Leonardo say about this? If it be dark, place it on a light ground. If it be light, upon a dark ground. And this is about getting them to detach from the background. And if it be partly light and partly dark, as in generally the case, contrives that the dark part of the figure be on the light part of the ground and the light side against the dark. Do you realize what I'm doing here? I'm going into educative mode, but it's just like anybody who really wants to do well with design and that sort of thing needs to know about this, needs to have thought about this. Once you've heard me just address it, and I'm really only introducing it, you'll find it a very rich field. But what he's saying in the second portion of that thing is what this is, right? Here, dark or dark against a light, dark against a lighter, and light. If you have a lighter guitar, you get the whole pattern of the guitar gets featured by surrounding it with darks, and you can see how that is. And then we'll talk about more things that have to do with these darks. It's got a lot of fun coming here. So that's just obvious. And so here I am doing it. And the thing you've seen, this is just a demonstration figure. I would have concluded this, but we did lose the model. I think she sunburned herself or something, I forget, and then she got called to duty. Were you in I forget, but she was in the Guard, maybe, the National Guard in this country. She was a great model, a great girl. Anyway, the evidence is the same, right? You have this light over here being featured against the dark. You have this light back here being used to feature the dark here, right? This is lost relatively. He talks about reflected lights and how much they can distribute, but that very faint hint of a reflected light is a silhouetting thing. So down here you have weaker contrasts, right? But it's still darks. In this case, more shadow than anything because this part is valuistically lost into the floor. But you can see what we're doing here is we are getting relief. We're getting the cloth to stand off the floor, the foot to stand in front of the floor, the separation, the detachment from the wall all the way down is because of these silhouettes all the way up it. And then there's the sense of the relievo, right, which is just literally the modeling. So the feeling of the round, which Degas is profoundly delightful in doing. So that great feeling of the round, so it's not 3D, so it's not 2D anymore. We're now talking the appearance of 3D. And it's all lies with the appearance of truth, right? Okay. Yeah, so maybe there'll be some other, I don't know if I'll come back to that. Of proper backgrounds, it's of the greatest importance to consider well the nature of backgrounds upon which any opaque body is to be placed, and in order to detach it properly. Now, why is that so important to detach it? You should place the light part of such opaque body against the dark part of the background, the dark parts on a light ground as in the cut, and that's is the example, is all he's talking about. So I'm just repeating, it's just the same thing. But then he gives this example. I had to recreate this. I couldn't get my camera to photograph it, so it's a weird recreation. I didn't do all the details he has in this. He does some very weird things with perspective. It doesn't feel quite like this almost feels like more science-based perspective than eye-based perspective, but perspective is pretty funny stuff. But he does show that eye level would theoretically be here. So if this to be like that much of an arc, if eye level is there, seems improbable. And other things about it seem improbable, but it was a new science at the time. So I'm not saying anything to pick on that. I'm saying now, again, here we are. He's saying, don't you see, there are several ways you can set up to get this relief, right? And I say that meaning, well, if we're talking about those casts, you can put a light cloth over here and a dark one over here. You can just find a middle tone ground and make sure the cast is dark enough on this side to make a silhouette. And that's just put a dark cloth over here blocking some of the light. But you just create these silhouettes. You can do it. This is the simplest way you can do it. This is the more complicated one that always winds up with this hard edge here. Or you could cast a shadow across the ground and have this be a soft edge because it'll be a soft shadow. If you just cast a shadow across it over here. Or the alternate one is to put a curved background on it, which this doesn't really show, but you can just have a slightly curved background where it's never in pure shadow and it'll be darker. That'd be right in this area, say. Be darker here and then gradually getting lighter and lighter and lighter, and that would be an ideal spot. I don't know. Maybe one of these does that. I don't know. But you can see that he's done the same thing as my setup, right? He's made the silhouette against that, the silhouette against that, and you can see that sense of coming forward, detachment from the background. Okay. This is supposed to be the shadow. These are supposed to be softer edges and all that sort of stuff. But I'm just giving you this because it was one of his references. He was referring to this. All right. But that gives you an idea, though, of various ways you can actually create your nice silhouettes. When you're doing a still life, one object behind the other, gives you all this opportunity all the time. For example, if it's a bowl, an open bowl, you can get exactly this. And then you can set something into it just like this, put a piece of fruit or two in front of a bowl, and you're creating all the values you need to create silhouettes here, silhouettes there. Yeah, so you're always using the object behind. So the background is what he's talking about. But the background doesn't necessarily mean that the background, it just means whatever is behind whatever you're setting up. So in a still life, you have one opportunity after the other. So take full advantage of it, as our person here did. You know, they began to use that in so many good ways to use the silhouette potential. Here's one where I'm showing that cast. So the cast shadow comes down and it softens that edge so it's not so abrupt and unpleasant. A hard edge is going to pop out of the background like this one does. It just screams forward. In fact, this one visually, in the sense of projection to the eye, this is more powerful than this one here, oddly enough, as you might say. But this one is because it has reflected lights on it that are hard to see, but they're going to be there right along that edge. So it's weakening the contrast in that spot. Again, another reason to just make this a little darker, unless you want me to stare at that bony corner there or have my eye be sucked over there or be constantly reminded it's there. It's like it's like a person off stage doing something when the performer is going on and they're making an obnoxious. There's a good story. Read some W.C. Fields stuff. You'll get some very funny stories about. But the idea is there is the place where you want the interest and you create it with hard edges and high contrast. You really want the interest way over here. So again, the relief is a different story. This one here has some distance behind this, but it's hard to see it. You can see it a little bit because of the darkness of this and this bounce back off of the wall here. But still, as in the abstract, this appears to be into your eye way faster than I guess anything else in this picture. And that's a thought. Do you want that? Is that what you want? So the detachment thing creates its own problems, doesn't it? Where do you want it detaching and how much, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that was that. So let's go down now and Gamble talking here. And this is where we start talking about the use of silhouettes and the silhouettes more specifically. The source from which Yang derived his phenomenal personal feeling for linear arabesques should be sought in Greek vase paintings, which he studied intensively throughout that decade. And I've shared with you comments in the past where definitely the source of using the Greek vase as a compositional idea was Ang's. Particularly, of course, he was doing it when he was creating those Greek paintings. I wonder if I show that. Maybe I do. Yes, I do. Here you go. So you see, you're still in the two-dimensional world right here, right? You're not getting relievo. Although you get a little suggestion of it by having good curves. You know, the curves give a sense of form to it a little bit. But this isn't modeling. This is without modeling, right? So this is just pure. Now we're talking about something like pattern. But what you'll see here is that the Greeks use like the silhouette to produce beautiful hand expression. You see that you can clearly see what's up here, what's going on with the threads and whatever else. I say that sounds like I don't know what's going on, right? But you know, each thing, you know, the way this person's sitting, it's very very telling. You know, all this just all done with the silhouette. So this is where, undoubtedly, because of the conversation coming out of Ang, the Degas is picking right up. And Degas was a very good student of Ang in the indirect sense, right? And had some conversations with him for sure. But if you start notice these hands down here. Now, so that's the first thing, is that they are expressive. So here you are seeing this guy running away, and he's using hands and the drapery in a very similar way, right? Very expressive in the pattern, in the silhouette. And And Gamel's use of the word linear arabesque is an interesting discussion unto itself, but it's another one I'm going to carry on with some other Gamel students one of these days, because the ambiguity of it, or the mixedness of it, shall we say, in the way it was presented to us. But you see again here, look at the use of the silhouette to create expression, to really express what's going on, the way the hand is. This could easily perform beautifully on a Greek vase, just flat, with no sense of form. Of course, if you're talking Ang here, he's a guy who just loves to get to the relievo part of it. This is very sculptural, and very sculpture in a Greek, sculpture in a kind of a Greek modeling kind of a way too. So now the second part of it is though interesting because what happens with the silhouettes is you have, first of all, a capacity to tell the story and to tell the truth about, make hands look plausible and all that sort of stuff. And then the second thing is though to entertain me, so that you get these very fascinating patterns, right? You see what I'm saying? And so the line meaning the contour, is making a very fascinating pattern. It's very different in different places. There's no end of fascinating abstract, like this whole grouping right here, or this whole thing right here. See how fascinating in the abstract it is. So this is the other part of our commission, shall we say, as painters. Our job is to, shall we say, tell the story. Our other job is to make it plausible, make yourself credible in terms of things like, shall we say, anatomy, so that the proportions, things like that, so they look plausible. The gesture looks plausible, all those sorts of things. But the other part is the entertainment factor, right? And so if you want to separate that, the beauty and truth thing, you might go there. But expression is another word for some of this. Patterning goes a long way to make it so, to make for the party, to entertain us, right? So there's that. Now this is what I enjoy. I wish I could find a good copy of this, Liz, if you're reading this, if you're hearing this. Liz Hunter, I think she may have the original, but I'm betting she has good photographs of one or either of these. But Gamel had done this. We hugely admire this. It's a magnificent piece of line drawing by R.H. Ives Gamel. And it seems to me I've seen this one in person. I had never seen this one here. But here you can see it's entertainment 101. In this way you'd say, he says the line arabesque. So you're talking about a linear thing that's happening, right, along the edge, right? If you want to call that the line arabesque, arabesque is a figure created by the leading lines of a composition. So, depending on how you think about this kind of stuff, that's why I say you have to have one of several possible definitions of the term arabesque. But when you're talking about up here, this is pure cutout pattern, right? And this is where Gamel's carries on a conversation about inventive patterning, interesting, inventive, so the curiousness of all this stuff, very Greek vase fed, shall we say. And that's the sort of thing. It's wonderful to see a guy admiring something in another painter and then possibly outdoing him. I don't know if Ang ever did one more fascinating than this in the purest sense of that word, of the creating a wonderful pattern, if Gamel wants to call it the arabesque, but a silhouette in that more limited way. More limited way. And by the way, just throwing these at you. Around us when I was a student, this was at the Fog. This Ang was at the Fog. This one here we saw it at the Walters. I think they own it in Maryland. And then Paxton had done a copy, which we also saw of that, and it was done in opaque paint. Ang was basically that guy. But it was done with Paxton's basic method, the amount of paint Paxton used. He was not attempting to do a surface like this, which is significantly smooth and all that sort of thing. But a really wonderful copy. High fidelity, you'd say, really, really good likeness. But this is that world, right? The entertainment value of pure shapiness, right? So contour, outline, is that what he's meaning by that? But I don't want to get into that. It's a different discussion. That's one for another person that I can bounce ideas off of. It's all silhouettes, said Degas. What the heck did he mean? There's so many ways to interpret things that Degas says, and everybody else who writes. To say it's all silhouettes. What is all silhouettes? Is all of painting nothing but silhouettes? Is silhouettes the key to all of painting? What does he mean? But you can see in his use of the silhouettes, and the one we showed you before, and then others coming up, how much dedication he puts into the silhouette. So this is a very simple, in one sense, painting, right? Big, dark silhouette in the foreground. This is Leonardo 101, you know. If you have a dark subject, put it against a light background. But look at the fascinating abstraction of patterns. This is a pattern. This is a silhouette of sorts, right? It's got lost and found and all that sort of stuff. But this is one, and there's the other one. This whole thing, if you blur your eyes, just look at the fascinating silhouette of the darks or of the lights, right? And as they say, and vice versa, right? So you have how am I doing here? So you can begin to grasp the significance of pattern of the silhouette. So this detaching from the background goes beyond just creating a sense of 3D, and it goes to the sense of being pictorially fascinating, right? And that's exactly what I would think that over time, that's what Leonardo would expect, right? Can you just, everything is about entertainment, no matter what truth we learn. It's about turning it into music, right? No matter what new thing when you find out about chroma, and all of a sudden you say, oh, chroma, oh, the latest, what is the chroma doing? Is it shifting as it does this? The reds, are they shifting? Or the colors, you know, so once you recognize this red, yellow, and blue, you start saying, well, how does that work? Then again, now you're talking about the music or the relative entertainment value of it. So, yeah, and he does get fairly interesting, but this one just looks like a Greek vase in some sense, doesn't it? Now, the guy goes so with the Greek vase, you see they're very disciplined about trying to show the story with it, but you're going to get with Degas. And by the way, here's the light created, you know, this is again Leonardo 101. The light is needing a dark ground to silhouette against. Look how he loses the face, though. He uses the background to read this, but to lose that. And he's fascinating me all the time with that. He doesn't feel a necessity to feature the face in pictures like this. His discussion is an impressionist one, or you might say a pure one, which is, tell me about the pattern. Entertain me with the pattern. Created by the silhouettes. By the way, so look at it, this big light thing over here, this is part of, and then this middle-sized one, and this different size, all these different lighter groups, and how they play just like a Greek vase and entertain. Okay? There's no end of it. Degas is a major entertainer. even like this is. I'm going to say, look at this for a second, but I want to bring you back just for a second. This is Leonardo 101, right? The whole background is basically flat. Everything about this picture is flat. Here's the relievo, right? This features itself by being 3D, where everything else is looking flat, and it detaches by its 3Dness. It comes out, but the hair is flat. Everything's flat. All this stuff is flat. Everything else is silhouetting, just silhouette, pattern, right? Very little suggestion of form apart from that. And then, but if you look for entertainment value at the spots, at the light spots and how they play through this whole thing, you see that this becomes a light spot, the face continuously attached to this. So that's value mass one, and then you have these distribution of other value blobs and in varying values, et cetera, et cetera. Very delightful piece of work, but this is where he eventually takes us. He's doing this. So silhouette is everything. So he creates a silhouette down here, right? Relievo. So he puts the woman behind the whatever it is she's hanging up there that she has to iron next, right? She's obviously a working person, ironing, right? Ironing for a living. But he manages to get the hands over the table by silhouettes. He gets the table to stand in front of the woman by silhouettes, and then he entertains us. This is where, but you can see, is he pulling our leg? Look how unattractive that abstraction is. But is it not entertaining? Are you not entertained? Are you amused? Right? But again, you know him to be the guy that seems to be breaking all the rules. But I'm showing you ways in which he's a great student. I think Gamble may have said that he possibly is the greatest student of painting ever, knowing so much about every aspect of it and showing it, and working it out and through his life, which you get to watch. I was going to say that about Benson, who's coming up in a minute, how much enjoyment you can get out of watching his development into areas very much related to this. But if you blur your eyes a little bit, you'll see that this woman's face is totally lost. Your silhouette of the head produced, so you read this, but the face is gone, right? All that gives you that face is the dots of dark. And you don't get it right away, you get it later. You get this way earlier, so to speak. But you can see as pure abstraction goes, he's just into these blobs, shall we say. On the other hand, he's trying to, and this appears to be so much of his work appears to be a work in progress. But you can see right here, he's done, again, Leonardo 101. He holds up the piece of paper to show, to make the face silhouette, to make the face come, detach from its ground. And of course, in so doing, he also makes this detach a little bit from the background, right? So you're getting step down. This dark in front of that light, in front of becoming a dark in front of this light, lighter than this, and definitely than that, all creating depth, step back, step back, step back. And of course, remembering that relievo is just the roundingness of it, shall we say, but the coming out, the detachment is a different aspect of that idea of creating the third dimension. Anyway, I just find him wildly entertaining, excuse my delight. I'm trying to remember why I used this one here. I meant to remove it from the other one. But this is one of those where you're talking about moving into a new zone here. You can see he's just entertaining us now. This is just pure entertainment. I mean, you look at this thing for a second, you can see what the subject is, but what the entertainment is these blobbity dotty things traveling across the page like this. The model, she's directing the traffic. She with her little funny fingers and the lights above her bouncing and doing their odd thing. But that begins to introduce the idea of spotting, or the distribution of spots. See, once you create silhouette, you create spots. Inevitably, you create spots. And then, there's that question of making your spots participate in the idea of the center. This is the center of interest. It's got the most variety and stuff. And then the round over here repeat and, in different places and so on. But this area between having the most color and the most variety of kinds of things gives us the center area. The entertainment value is hyper. It's all the good stuff is sort of there, the best colors, et cetera, et cetera. I'd say the hot colors maybe. Now, not all these things are always true that way. Don't be simplistic about it, but that gets you started. I'm only mentioning this. This is briefly. This is Carlos Duran, and you can see he's doing the same thing. He's getting silhouette value, putting the face against a black, putting the black against a middle tone, and all these things. And there's that wonderful power of silhouette, et cetera, et cetera. But in both cases here, you begin to get the idea, and this is the one by Tarbell that I talk about, so highly regarded. But it's not about the cutting out of the silhouette of the hand. You have plenty of information to make the hand. It's much. This one now gets into the intrigue of Lost and Found. The intrigue meaning in the sense of mystery and all that sort of stuff. So maybe it's it might convey something of the mysteriousness of the law, or of some imposing authority figure that, the law meaning something that most of us only have a working sense of if we happen to get stuck in breaking it, shall we say. Anyway, but you wind up with this question of spots, right, in the same way. So you have the most brilliant couple spots with other pieces of them, secondary spots and tertiary spots, et cetera. You can think that way about these things. I'm just saying it can come to you that way. Again, the relievo model is very much alive here, isn't it? Really, Sargent's, made his living off of popping, dramatically popping things out of the background, which this one does. But I'm spending too much time there. This one's where Benson eventually takes us. And I said, if you go to his etchings, here you can see the entertainment value of the abstraction in the patterny sense, right? Like the Greek vase in that sense. And here's the entertainment value by spotting, fascinating me with abstract spots. So you can blur your eyes at this, but anybody who's aware of these things will have an aesthetic distribution of values by size, by placement on the page and all those sorts of things. And it'll have an overall unity to it that is that's inevitable. This is, but the one thing leading to another. You start with this idea of separating things from the background, and you wind up in the world of the delight of spotting, which Leonardo does allude to. But then we get back to this pure entertainment thing. So what is the fun of these things? Is it because it's realism, or is the fun, like real horses or whatever, or the racetrack? Is this really a painting about? He sort of defies you to say it's a painting about the racetrack, even though it is, or a painting about the ballet. It's actually music, right? It's actually music by values. So he's doing something rather similar in a certain way here. He's got this dark coming out of here and just bouncing up and starting to get smaller, and separating into the most interesting maybe area, and then turning into whites and going out here. But this is where the entertainment value just goes so high. And they're talking about music now, which is very, very, very different from just getting a thing to stand in relief from the background. This is outdoors, but he's painting the wall. This thing here, so it looked like a prop in the in the ballet, in the stage. Very interesting stuff. Reminds me a little bit of Alfred Hitchcock, if you know how he thinks about backgrounds. But here again, you can see the delight of the silhouettes of dark on light, light on dark. But now we got to the point where we're just talking about for its own sake. Yes, it's separating. It makes the leg show, but it's not the purpose of it. The purpose of it, his high-end purpose, and this is where I am saying that Degas reaches this high watermark. He gets to the point where he just says, wait a minute, I'm supposed to be entertaining people. They're supposed to be enjoying these pictures no matter what the subject is. And he starts saying, well, where is the entertainment? Well, it's in color. It's in shape. It's in line. It's in silhouette. It's in et cetera, et cetera. Do you see what I mean? I mean, if you just look at the dance of these whites, this is just party time. It's just a riot. You could say this big white coming out of here and bouncing across here related. Maybe there's all these other whites that relate to that. True. I mean, even the coordination of this line to this, and even to this concept here, there's very straightforward, visual data. So we go from just trying to detach from the background, or from trying to create a sense of the third dimension, to finally getting to the point where we realize, and this is my dominating argument, that this is the party that we're in. And your job is to make it so that you have a picture like this on somebody's wall, they won't want to take it down. It's so enjoyable to look at. But it has all these elements of logic and entertainment at the same time. Now, he's a good draftsman, so it's not like the drawing is any kind of a problem. And by the way, there are times when you look at Degas and you think, what's wrong with his drawing? But the fact is, it's the right drawing for the purpose, for the occasion of the picture, for what the picture's up to. Some of these cartoon character heads down here, tops of heads, he definitely has a sense of humor. He's definitely amusing us. But the idea that there's a bunch of blobs here that wind up showing up in little blob heads out here. I mean, there's no end of the entertainment value and all this stuff. So I'm just ending there. This is my wandering. So I hope you enjoyed that. It's what happens over a time. You need to introduce yourself to first things, right? So if you're talking about first things, you're talking about when you set up a cast, just do that to it, right? It just all begins right here, and then you'll find yourself wanting to do something. When you set up a still life, expand it, extend it, coordinate it with other things, and before you know it, you'll be in the party that really isn't just the pedantic aspect of nature being visually true and looking three-dimensional, fooling our eye, but in the more powerful and more important way of being a delight, right? And that is what the arts are. They're there to lighten the soul. I mean, Robert Louis Stevenson referred to his novels as drugs. So in a sense, to lighten the soul, right? It's escape in a way. But there's something about what we do, this idea of beauty and the value of, it's an extension of what nature does as well. So if you have a great color scheme, if you have the way form talks to form and the way the play happens, the composition in a rectangle, all these things, and Why not the story? So much so that what I'm trying to say is we suddenly have value that we can recognize in the same way as music played to plants makes them grow 10% better than classical music or something, some number repeatedly in those tests. And so my question, so to myself and maybe to all my students, is when when you're painting, are you aware of the other guy and whether or not he's going to have a life improvement, a life elevation, because a lift, even just the way a crow shook down on me, the dust of snow from a hemlock tree, has given my heart a change of mood and saved some part of a day I had rued. That are you giving that? Are you delivering that? So I believe we have that in us, the capacity to do that. Comfort ye, my people. Um, you know, it's that, and of course, much more, being God's creation. Okay, I better get out of here, guys. Thank you again very much, Jimmy C. Lindsay for the new Lindsay, and and man, did I forget? And Toby N. Um, I think two of you guys are new to doing this. I really appreciate it. And yeah, and let's keep sharing. Oh, I'm supposed to say, I'm sorry. I'm supposed to say, don't forget to share. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for subscribing, for commenting. Keep the comments coming, for liking, and all the rest. Okay. And now we'll do it again. See you next time. Have a great week.